Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am honored to welcome and bring to the listeners Captain Albert of Holland America Line. Captain Albert created and curates Captain Albert's website and blog, described as ocean liner history and stories from the sea, past and present, with an in-depth focus on Holland America Line. Captain Albert J. Schoendebeek joined Holland America Line in 1981 on the old SS Statendam. He sailed a variety of house ships, attaining the rank of captain in 2000. Captain Albert's longest stints as captain were on Veendam, 2004 to 2008, and Princeton Dam, 2008 to 2011. In 2014, Captain Albert was offered the opportunity to assume the function of traveling master and later fleet master to lead a first-in-industry program to provide training for captains and deck officers. Like everything else, the program was put on hold when COVID hit. Earlier this year, burdened by having to repay the debt incurred due to the need to keep the fleet in running order while not generating revenue during the pandemic, the decision was made to shelve the program for at least 3 years, as that would put the restart of the program beyond Captain Albert's official retirement date in 2025. The company offered early retirement this year after 42 years of service to HAL. Working on board HAL cruise ships has been Captain Albert's vocation. His avocation is also cruise ships, running Captain Albert's website and blog, traveling on non-house ships with his wife Leslie on what they call busman holidays, a vacation spent observing someone else in the practice of one's usual occupation, and writing books, including Captain Albert's current massive project, a 5-part history of Holland America Line. Welcome, Captain Albert, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Oh, how are you today?
Just doing fine. How you doing?
Not too bad. Happily retired since a few months, so I'm living the dream.
Living the dream. So you're off to a blissful retirement. Have you planned anything special yet?
At the moment, well, my life continues as it normally was before, apart from being a captain with Holland America Line and now lately the fleet master. I also are the company historian, so I got it into my mind for the 150 years of our glorious company to write the history book. I did the same thing in 1998 for the 125 years, so now for the 150 again. And then when I was talking to the publisher, he say, okay, there is much more that you know than we can put in one book, so why don't we make two? So we made 2 books, and then they said, how big is your photo collection? And I said, over 20,000 photos from 1873 onwards. He said, okay, then we're going to do 3 more photo books. So now I'm right in the middle of the first of the 3 photo books. So I am not bored, put it that way.
Well, that sounds like an engaging project, and we'll talk about that some more a little later. But you got to take some time out and celebrate.
Well, hopefully I'll have many years to do it. It's only once, 150 years Holland America Line, so that takes precedence at the moment, and my good days will come a little bit later.
All righty. So before we discuss your fascinating career with Holland America Line, tell our listeners about yourself. Where you're from, where you grew up, where you live, family, whatever you would like to share.
Okay, well, I joined Holland America Line in 1981, and it was in the days that we were all Dutch officers. So as a result, I'm Dutch. I was born in the Netherlands in 1958. And when I was about 7 years old, I found a postcard from the old New Amsterdam from 1938. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Lifeboats, portholes, funnels. I start collecting postcards. And then a few years later, I found out that Holland America still existed because they had left the Netherlands by that time to go full-time cruising, mainly from the American coast. And so I said, I want to be on a ship like that. So I went to the Maritime Academy in Amsterdam in 1976, took my license in 1981, and joined Holland America shortly after. And I've been with that company ever since. So I started sailing in 81 and I kept sailing until my retirement day.
So,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say that's an amazing story. It sounds to me like your future was kind of established at age 7.
Well, I don't think I'm the only one. Remember that you had children who were looking with great amazement at the trains coming by on the railroads, and those who want to be a fireman or a police officer young during their age, and most of them went that way as well. It was just for me, I saw ships, and that was my future, so I did, and I have never looked back.
So you went to the Maritime Academy. You talked about when you joined, Hal, but let me ask you a question. Had you cruised for leisure before you started working at sea?
No, apart from going, I was born in a place called Ede in the middle of the Netherlands, close to the German border. So when I picked up my interest in ships, I had not even seen the sea until I went there with my parents on holiday. And until I did my first training on board the cadet ship, the only water experience I had was going on a river cruise into Germany. And for the rest, it was all brand new to me. But I knew a lot about it because you read books, you buy books, you do all sort of things. And so I knew what I was getting into. And I have never been disappointed.
So talk about your first experience on a ship. What were your impressions of cruising?
When I came on board, this was a bit strange because I had gone for my interview, and they say we'll let you know where you will join, what ship you will join, how you will join. So I'm sitting at home, I don't get any answer. So in the end, I phone, and the company said, and this sounds very funny, but I explain. They said we lost the ship.
Now you have to say more.
Yeah, I said, how's that possible? He said, well, something happened to the Statenham, and we don't know where the ship is at the moment. It turned out they had a engine room fire, and they had been towed into Curaçao for repairs. But this happened on a Friday, and the office in Holland closed on Friday afternoon. And by the time New York office, which run the cruise ship side, was just opening, so they did not know what was going on. So I called back on Monday morning, and I said, yeah, we found the ship. It's in dry dock in Curaçao, and you're flying to Caracas, and from Caracas to Willemstad in Curaçao to join the ship. So that was my first entry to Holland America, starting with a ship that was somewhere that we didn't know. But it all worked out, and I walked on board in a dry dock.
So when you boarded the ship, you said it was in dry dock. How long before you got on the ocean?
I think it was about 10 days before those days the ships were steamships. It was about 10 days before they had that boiler repaired. And then we sailed back empty to Miami, and then loaded our next group of guests. About 750 was the capacity of the ship, and started doing 10 and 11 day cruises around the Caribbean from Miami. And this was before the days that Holland America sailed permanently from Port Everglades or Fort Lauderdale in the wintertime. And it was a nice experience because things in those days were fairly relaxed. If you left port, it was the captain in command, and you found out when you came back to port what the company wanted from you next, because apart from telex, there was hardly any communication with the ship. So it wasn't really a carefree, easygoing world, and the guests really enjoyed the product, so everybody was happy.
On that first experience on a ship, did you have any anxiety about things like seasickness or anything like that?
No, I was too excited to be on board. I never thought about anything like it. I remember that my mother was greatly upset because the first time I sent a letter home and then tried to call home, which in those days was not easy either. It was about 8 weeks later. I never gave it any thought. I was too excited to sail around on a nice cruise ship.
Now, what were your duties on your first assignments on what you said was Statendam, right?
So yeah, Statum number 4. In the meantime, we're up to a new Statum number 6 in the fleet, and between we had a Statum 5 as well. So it's all the Merkline repeats the name of the ships all the time. So when I started out on the Statum 4 in 1981, I was fourth officer. That was assistance of the watch. So you assisted the senior watchkeeper with lookout, with filling out the logbook, with taking star sightings, sun sightings, because this was also days before GPS. And then in ports, you organized boat drills. And then you spent also time at the gangway, taking the gaps when the security officers went on their breaks. So it was quite varied, a lot of interaction with the guests, and a lot of interesting sailing. Very enjoyable.
So, given your excitement that you described and the pace of things, you said it was very enjoyable. Sounds like that first assignment on Statendam was quite fulfilling.
Yeah, I still look back at that one with great enjoyment because it was such an easy-going ship. Later on, when we went through the ranks and on the bigger ships where you have more crews, so things were much more tightly organized. The cruises became shorter and shorter. The ports became more organized. So it was all a bit more, I don't want to say more professional, but a bit more tighter controlled. But at first 2 or 3 years after starting, I went to the Volendam number 2. Those were the easygoing years, and it was really, really great fun.
So take us through the progression of your career at Howe. You started on Statendam number 4, and then you said Volendam. Walk us through it until you got to Fleet Master.
Yeah, okay. So it started with Statendam number 4 as fourth officer. Then I got promoted on the end of the Statendam cycle to third officer. That gives you your independent watch. Then I did a little bit of time on the Volendam. And then I was called to France because Holland Merkline started building new ships, the New Amsterdam and Noordam from 1983-84. And I was called over because that found out in my file that I spoke French. And most Dutch people speak several languages, so for us it's nothing special. So they said, okay, if we got a French guy there, then we can understand what these people in dry dock are really talking about during a new building. And so then I was there. Then I went in 1986 to the Rotterdam 5, the flagship of the company. There I made a second officer. Then I moved over to the Westerdam number 2, that we took over from Home Lines because that company went sort of bankrupt in 1988. And there I made a second senior. We went to Germany where we cut the ship in half and made it a little bit longer to have more passengers on board. And then in 1981, I was back on the New Amsterdam, made chief officer there. And then I went up and down in the ranks for 2 years because I had the option to be chief officer, that is second in command on the 7-day cruises, or senior navigator on the long cruises. Now, and long cruises are much more fun, and I was not that bothered about making promotion. I was going to get there anyway, being at a lifetime occupation. So I stayed there, and then I made captain in the year 2000 on the New Amsterdam. And from there, I went to the Statendam number 5 in the meantime, and then went through all the way around the fleet, sailed on the Veendam, which is now sailing for the Greeks, and then ended up on the Prinsendam in 2009. That's now sailing for the Germans because during COVID we sold off quite a few of the older ships. And then in 2014, the company asked me if I was willing to become fleet master to start training the younger officers, because they said you are a good teacher and you're very enthusiastic, so you can sell your company very well to the new generation. And I've been doing that with great fun until retirement.
Now, you met your wife, Leslie, on Holland America Line. Say something about that.
Okay, so Leslie went to sea because she wanted to see the world. So she joined first a Greek company and then a Norwegian company and a Swedish company as a hairdresser. Then she got an assignment with Holland America Line in 1986. And she said, okay, this company is the best I've ever seen. So she stayed with it. Then she was on a world cruise 1987 on the Rotterdam, and I was there as well. So we met sometime between Bali and Hong Kong, and the rest is history. So we got, then she stayed, she went from hairdresser to cruise staff, then she became world cruise hostess, and then in the end ended up escorting American groups of passengers on the world cruises. And in between we got married in 1991, and as she was British, I moved to England because she was not willing to learn the Dutch language. My beautiful Dutch language is very difficult for a foreigner. So we settled down here in England in 1991, and we're still together and we're still here.
Most of the time when Leslie was, as she progressed through the company, were you both on the same ship most of the time?
No, most of the time we were sailing apart, and that went well because I think because we met later on in life, we were not in our 20s anymore, but in our 30s. So we had lived already an independent life. So being away from each other was not a bad thing. It was just when we met up again, it was a sort of perpetual honeymoon. So it worked out extremely well. And later on, when I became captain, she started sailing more and more with me. So we sailed more together. But in the beginning, we were quite often apart.
So as you reflect back, and we're certainly going to talk about after you became fleet master and started chronicling the history of how, but just reflecting back at your time as a captain, or even before you reached captain, what would you consider as the highlights of your 42 years at HAL?
Oh, that's a difficult one because there were many. One of the highlights was, which is something very personal, was sailing the Rotterdam 5 out of service, which is now a hotel in the city of Rotterdam. Luckily, she's still there. And that Rotterdam ship was something special because it was a very fast steamship, and B, it had this enormous history behind it, being one of the last transatlantic liners from 1958. So everything on board was different than a regular cruise ship, but also from a operational point of view. I think the best way to explain it is if you put a Rolls-Royce and a Cadillac next to each other. Both are very luxurious cars, but Rolls-Royce just drives differently. And if you compare the Rotterdam 5 with any newer, most modern, more luxurious ship, that Rotterdam still drove in a special way that we'll never see again. When we had bad weather with the modern ships, you slowed down for coastal rides. With that Rotterdam, that old North Atlantic ship made for bad weather, we went a bit faster because then the bow came out of the water and she would surf across the ocean. It was just something different, something that is an experience that once you have seen that and done that, that's something you'll never forget. So that was very much of a highlight in my career.
Now you said it serves as a hotel in Rotterdam now?
Yes, sir. It is the biggest hotel in Rotterdam. It's docked just across from where our old head office is, which is now also a hotel. So if guests come to the Netherlands and they take a cruise from Rotterdam, they have the option to fly into Rotterdam, to stay on the Rotterdam, and then sail on the Rotterdam. 3 different ships, the town of Rotterdam, the old Rotterdam ship, and the new Rotterdam that sails from Rotterdam on cruises through Europe and the rest of the world.
I will take this moment to inject that you should be proud of me because I have booked my first cruise on Holland America Lines on Rotterdam.
Very good, sir.
Yep. It's going to Panama Canal. It's not for a while. It's like a year away. I haven't been on HAL, and I wanted to try. I actually called a mutual friend, Candace, and I said, well, what's the best HAL ship for Panama Canal? And of course, Candace is a super HAL fan, and she said all of them. But anyway, I settled on Rotterdam. When you were talking about it was the Rotterdam as a hotel, in an earlier podcast, actually, it hasn't aired yet. So the interview was earlier, but it hasn't aired yet. I talked to a staff member for HAL, and during the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, a ship was used as a hotel for people fleeing the war area. So I wonder, was that the Rotterdam or was it another ship? I can't remember what ship she said.
No, that was the Volendam, and she was docked in Rotterdam. So that's why the name Rotterdam comes from. But she was from April till September in Rotterdam, and she was used as a hotel to process the Ukrainian refugees coming in before they were being let loose in the country. And some of them have gone back in the meantime, but a lot of them are still there, and they're now part of the Dutch economy, waiting until they can return.
Any other highlights you want to talk about? How about when you first became captain? Was there any kind of ceremony? Was that considered obviously it was a major milestone in your career, but does the ship or the cruise line do anything special?
No, not at all. I remember this as well because we were docked in Barbados, and I was staff captain, and at 8 o'clock the captain walks into my cabin and says, "Hey, I got some news for you. I have to go to a conference, you're captain." And that was it. And then my next thing was that by 12 o'clock, the chief engineer phoned me and said, "We have a mechanical challenge. You won't sail to midnight." So my first announcement to the guest on board was, say, "I got some bad news. We're not leaving yet from Barbados, but I have some good news. We sail by midnight, and I'm still going to make St. Lucia on time." So I was the hero of the day without having sailed an inch, because I made the ship go on time, or not on time, but arriving in the next port on time. So that was the start of my career.
Great.
Yeah.
So in researching you, I found it interesting, Captain Albert, that you and Leslie like to cruise on other lines. I've interviewed a number of cruise line officers and staff, but I don't typically hear that. That sounds kind of interesting. Talk about that. What do you look for? Are there lines that you are particularly favorable to?
Okay, well, first of all, Leslie, before she came to Holland America Line, had sailed on about 10 or 11 different ships as a hairdresser. So she always kept that interest, what will the other ship look like? And of course, for me, that apart from working on a cruise ship, the history of Holland America Line in particular, but ocean liner history all around it, has been my interest from 7 years onwards. So I know Holland America Line, I love Holland America Line, I write about Holland America Line, I have an enormous collection about Holland America Line, but I also like to see what Cunard or P&O or whatever other company is like, how it compares to Holland America Line, what they do different, and how their ships are being laid out and built and constructed. So it's an interest that goes beyond just being a ship's master or an officer belonging to Holland America Line. So what we do is we don't always like to fly when we're on leave. So we try to get on board for a short cruise or a longer cruise on every ship that sails out of a British port. So now we have more or less finished all the English companies and a few outside ones. And so now we're waiting for more ships to arrive in the UK, and luckily the UK is a very thriving cruising community, so there are a lot of ships coming in to take the British on holiday. And then if we can board either in Southampton or in Portsmouth or in Dover or in Tilbury, then we see, okay, can we do a nice cruise? And off we go to see what that company is like and what the ship is like.
Have you and Leslie done a river cruise together yet?
Yeah, we did a number of years ago an opera cruise on the River Rhine. So what they do with those cruises, they bring a number of singers from the London Philharmonic on board. And then during the daytime, you go to music venues, and in the evening, they do performances on board. It's very nice. It's what they call 5-star river ships. And basically, it's a very interesting experience, bit of culture combined with seeing the sights. And that was very nice to do. So we have now another one on our plans for, I think, the end of next year, because I've never done a river cruise from, I think this one's being from Passau all the way to Constanza, so the eastern part of the Danube. So that's on the list as well.
You know, another mutual friend of ours, Captain Boz, who, as you know, has been on the show, he will not cruise in his retirement. However, the last I spoke to him, and we're nearly neighbors a couple of towns over, but last I talked to him, he was very much considering a river cruise. He has no desire to get on a ocean-going cruise ship, but he said he's close to a river cruise. So give him a holler and push him over the hump.
Yeah, okay, I'll do so. I know Captain Boss since 1981 because he was also on het Statenland when I joined.
Oh, really?
We have been going through the ranks. He is 4 years older than I am, so he was a little bit ahead of me all the time. So when I was 4th officer, he was 3rd officer. When he was 3rd officer, I was 2nd officer. And when I spoke in 1997, when we sailed out the Rotterdam 5, I was the staff captain and he was the captain. So we have been sailing together for many, many years until we split up because I made my captain in my own right. And Peter is a great guy, but he is typically a captain who likes to be a captain on the bridge and related. And I'm somebody who can say, okay, captain on the bridge is very nice, but captain in the bar isn't being bad either. So I can just enjoy both sides of the coin. But I think he will enjoy being on a river cruise because there's constantly something happening and constantly something to see.
Yeah. Now, educate me, Captain Albert. You differentiated between a captain on the bridge and then a captain at the where?
Bar. Having a drink.
Oh, okay. So that suggests to me. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're more sociable. And Captain Boz is more something else. Not.
Peter is as sociable as I am. It's just that I see the perspective that there is more to it than just being on the bridge and doing your job. So I can put everything a bit better in perspective. So that's why I can say I'm going on a cruise and I can enjoy this because I don't think about who is driving on the bridge. I'm much more thinking about the fact that will I make cocktail hour on time in the afternoon.
Okay. So, of course, cruising came to a screeching halt a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And that had a profound effect ultimately on your How career, right?
Yeah. So I was on the Rotterdam 6. That's the Rotterdam that is now been sold and is now sailing for Fred Olsen, the English cruise company.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there with Captain Bas van Dreumel, who you most likely will meet when you make your Rotterdam cruise next year. And we were waiting in Port of Yata to see what happens. And of course, nothing happened. We went in layup eventually. And so I flew home and had to wait, of course, at home for the whole COVID thing to sort of come to an end, because the company said we cannot have you hopping from ship to ship, do your thing with the captains and with the officers and everything else. Because if you would leave one ship and on the next ship COVID would flare up again, then they will point the finger at you and at us. We have to wait. So when that was more or less over, the company was trying to phase me in again. But of course, now with this current situation that each ship has to earn back the debt it caused by being in layup, they said there will be not much room for how they call supporting programs, what a fleet master's duty is. So they said, we'll make you an offer you can't refuse for retirement. And that's what I did. But hey, I was 65 anyway, so why not?
So during that time of the shutdown, I suspect you were working on your big HOW project. Did you get a lot of work done?
That started then because I said, okay, well, now I finally got the chance to look exactly what I have in my library and what I have in my photo library and what I have stacked away in boxes on the bridge. So I know that what I have available. And when I wrote the book in 1998, that's what I call a nut and bolt book. So that means from every ship, the correct dates from in the company history, exactly the correct date, that on Monday morning, 7:15, this happened, and on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, that happened. And now for 120, 150 years, I want to make more a book that was, first of all, easy to read, and secondly, would tell the story of our company from a narrator's point of view. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been doing. And of course, for that, you need different illustrations, you need different photos, and you need different tidbits to make it interesting for the reader. And so far, where I hear about the way the sales are going, that has been successful.
Great. Now, have you and Leslie cruised since the restart?
Yes, because we were nosy, of course, so we want to see what Fred Olsen had done with the Rotterdam and the Amsterdam, which is now called the Borealis and the Boulette. Mm-hmm. And so we hopped on board on both ships for the first 3-day opener cruise to see what it was. And we have completed it now, and it was interesting. Fred had some very good ideas with that ship. Those ships, for them, it was an enormous improvement in the quality of their product with the size and ships, and of course, the newer the ships were. And so now next year we're going back on the Boulette, which is the old New Amsterdam, to see how they finish the ship off and to see how well they have done. But it was looking very good. It's a really good addition for the British market.
Had it changed much? I'm sure there were a lot of cosmetic changes. Were they, was it still recognizable as the old Rotterdam? And
they changed very little because the owner of the company, Fred Olsen, is privately owned by Mr. Olsen from Denmark, Norway side. Mm-hmm. And so what they did, of course, all the Holland American Line artwork was taken off, replaced with more modern works out of collection of Mr. Olsen. And then the only thing they really changed is they took away the casino because British don't gamble compared to the American public. British don't gamble. So they doubled the size of what was our sports bar into the Morning Star pub. So that whole area that was casino before is now a pub area, which is extremely important for the British. So that was the major change. But the Crow's Nest, the lounges, it is still all the same, only a bit more focused to a British public than it would have been to the American public.
Yeah, I just learned something. So I know how important to the culture of UK pubs are, but I did not know that British people don't gamble in the casino.
Yeah, so there are of course British people who gamble. There are casinos in the United Kingdom, but it is a very small minority of the population. So it is not interesting for a cruise ship company out of the English ports focused on a British product to even put one roulette or table in or a slot machine, which we call fruit machines over here, because you can make much more money by putting an extra bar in and having an extra pint in the evening. So it's a different culture.
Let's shift gears a little bit to talk about Captain Albert's website and blog.
Okay.
So when and what motivated you to create Captain Albert's website and blog?
Okay, in 2007, I spoke to a gentleman like you who was promoting cruises, and he had a magazine called Sea Magazine. So with a big C, but you can also call the sea like the sea, the ocean. And he said, "Would you like to write a column in my magazine?" I said, "Of course, no problems there." And then he said, "Okay, I'm starting now a blog. Would you like to write a page in my blog once in a while?" Okay, I'm willing to do that. Then what happened is, what nobody really knew is that blogs were quite new in 2007. And the chairman of Carnival Corporation, Mr. Mickey Harrison, was reading every blog that was out there. And there was a blog from me as a sailor from Holland Line. There was a blog from a P&O purser, and there was a blog from somebody else, also a sailing person. So the next thing happens, I get Holland America on the phone and said, "We want you to come in-house and become part of our blog setup." I said, "Okay, I can do that, but if you look at it, I already started to expand my blog site. It's now basically a website with all these histories of the old captains on there, the ships, and God knows else. So let's do it as a website that is linked in to the Holland America blog." So I did that from 2007 onwards, 2020, every day that I was at sea. And then, of course, it came, even when I made Flea Master, it continued because the perspective doesn't change very much. And then in 2020, of course, it stopped a little bit. And because, nobody's interested what I do when I go to the supermarket for shopping. So that came to an end. So I've been adding more historical stuff to the website. But as soon as the book is out of the way, or better said, the series of 5 is out of the way, this whole thing is going to be revamped. And then you get more history. And then also you will get what I call cruising with Captain Albert, that you get my impressions of when we are on our next cruise ship.
So we have something in common because I've been in the Holland America blog. You know, I write books, and my second book was called Cruising Interrupted. Obviously, got that name from the pandemic, and I did a feature on Candace, and that feature got put in the Holland America blog. So I got a little bit in common with you.
It's a small world.
So you've alluded to it already, but talk about the status of your major endeavor with your 5-volume project.
Okay, so number 1 came out in January of this year, well ahead of the 150-year birthday of the company, which is on April 18. Then I did a second book, which is in-depth topics of the company, where I highlighted special topics like immigrants, a voyage to the Far East, because Holland America also the cargo company, a line running to the Dutch East Indies, and a number of these other things. And then on April 18, both me and my co-author, which is basically the publisher of those books, and he does the layout and the design. So I write and I provide the photos, and he puts the brake on and does the rest. So on the 18th of April, we were both on the in Rotterdam, to present book 1 and book 2 to the current president of the company, Mr. Gus. And then in the afternoon, we were also present with the festivities when Princess Margaret, or Princess Margriet of the Netherlands, came over to celebrate 150 years Holland Merklijn. And now I'm busy with the photo book, and that is costing a lot more time than I thought it would. And that is basically because the fact that I first had to select 2,000 photos out of the 20,000. So what my challenge was, and still is, I had a big collection of photos. I selected 2,000, and then each book will feature 750 of them. And now I had to sit down and write a story about 200 words for each photo. And that turned out to be very time consuming, because I had to put myself in the shoes of the person who was looking at the book, look at the picture, and then had to understand what he was seeing. It's very interesting to do it and very great to do it, but it's taking a lot of time. So my days are well filled.
If I understand correctly, the first two volumes can be purchased already, right?
Yeah.
And you're working on 3 through 5. So tell listeners who might be interested how they can obtain the first two volumes.
Okay, the easiest way to do it, because as we try to keep the cost, first of all, you can buy book 1 by taking a cruise on Holland Merklijn, because the company has put them in the shops. So that's option 1. The second thing is, for otherwise, the easiest way is to go online and Google G Books International. So that's G from Gulf, G Books International. That brings up the website, and it gives the American agent who is selling them in the States, so you can buy them without incurring any postal costs from Europe. So that works the best. G Books International.
I'll tell you, that's great that you have the books on the line. You know, my books cut across all cruise lines, and I fantasize about cruise lines stocking my books on board. How can fans follow Captain Albert's website and blog on the internet? And do you have a presence on social media as well? Talk about, tell them how they can do that as well.
No, not social media, not yet. So for Captain Albert, it's easy. The website is called captainalbert.com, and then you come to the front page, and everything is there. So at the moment, apart from adding tidbits to the history of the old captains, not much is happening. But by the end of this year, hopefully that will change. I will revamp the website, and then we start with the cruising. I'll probably go on the lecture circuit, so that gives even more ships to review and to talk about, because I was lecturing on Holland Merklijn on the ships as well, if there was a gap in the cruise director schedule. So that's all coming as soon as the books are out of the way.
Great. Well, continued best wishes with the book collection as well as the website and blog. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the future. Do you have anything booked?
Oh yes. Also, next year we have December. We have a Christmas market cruise booked on the Ambition from Ambassador Cruise Lines. That is a new startup sailing out of England, typically for the British market. There's only hop across Antwerp and Hamburg and for a few days. And because Leslie wants to go to the Christmas market, I want to go to the Maritime Museum in Hamburg, so we're both happy. Then next year, the big thing is we are on the maiden voyage of the Queen Anne of Cunard. And that is a cruise from Southampton to Spain and back again. And we're mainly going there because we want to see what Cunard has done with the sister ship of the Rotterdam, the New Amsterdam, and the New Statendam, because it's of the same class. It's a Pinnacle class ship that was shifted over to them. And of course, Cunard is a totally different product. And so if you look at the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Victoria, they are Vista class ships. But the designed by Holland America, but again, the inside is completely different. And Cunard has done some very nice stuff with those ships. So we want to see what they have been doing with the Queen Anne in its layout. So we're going to have a look at that one. And then after that, we have that river cruise coming. And then there is also a cruise with Silver Seas that Leslie popped up somewhere because they were discounting in the UK. So, hey, he said, that's a price we cannot let go. So we're doing that one as well.
Great. Have you been on Cunard before?
Yeah, company sailing for England. So we did all three ships, the Queen Mary, the Queen Victoria, and the Queen Elizabeth, all three for a shorter cruise. And the Queen Mary we did with a crossing. So we spent some time in New York and then went back again.
You know, Cunard's on my bucket list, but I don't know when I'm going to do it. I'm wondering about, I hear it's very formal. You know, the last time I wore a tux on a ship was before the pandemic, and I remember thinking this is probably the last time I'll ever wear a tux on the ship, and I guess I gotta, get it out for my Cunard cruise, if I can still fit in it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, yes, it is formal, and yes, they expect you to dress up, but as far as a tuxedo is concerned, I have every permutation under the sun for all this sort of stuff. But what I like to wear on a formal night is a Nero shirt, like with a high collar and a stone in it. Muhammad Ali used to wear them a long time in the past. And with a white jacket, that's formal as well. You're not stuck with walking around like a penguin in a black thing. You can wear anything you want as long as it is a sort of formal and a bit festive. So you make it a special night.
Well, that's good to hear, because to be honest, I doubt I can get in my tuxedo anymore. Do you have a travel bucket list?
Yeah, there are several things I still want to do. One of them is now coming is sailing on the Danube, the eastern part. Another thing is, which we'll probably do in 2026, is to do a coastal in Croatia and do all these little ports where the largest ships cannot go to. I've been with the Holland America ships to Dubrovnik and to was the other one up the coast to Slovenia, to Koper. But you have all these little ports in between that only fit the small ships. So that's something that is on the bucket list. And I think I've been to Greenland as a passenger on a ship Leslie was working on after her Holland America period. And I would like to go back to Greenland, but again with a small ship, so we can go up the coast into the small ports where none of the other ships can go. So that is also still on the bucket list to do one day.
Very good, very good. Well, Captain Albert, before we let you go, a couple of light questions, even fun cruise questions, and then perhaps a fun oddball question that doesn't necessarily have to do with cruising at all. So the first light question. This is just so that I can get some ideas for my upcoming cruises. What's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
Okay, favorite cruise drink is if I can get a local draft craft beer on board. And cruise companies are doing that more and more, and that's something I really like. I'm not really a heavy wine and a heavy liquor drinker, but if a cruise company is promoting a local craft beer, like they very often do on the ships sailing out of Seattle, that is something I really like to do. And for favorite food, as long as it has garlic in it, I'm the man who will order that dish.
Yep. Are you a fan of the specialty restaurants?
Some of them, yes, if it applies to my appetite. Like with Holland America, I like the Pinnacle because Northwestern seafood is nice, and of course I like the restaurant with the Far Eastern fusion food, the Tamarind. And when I go on the British ships, a nice curry Indian restaurant is nice as well, as long as it has some spice and some zoom to it, and it is nicely presented, then I'm all in favor.
For my Rotterdam cruise, I was able to get two specialty meals, and one's in Pinnacle and one's in Tamarind, which I've heard
Very
a
good.
lot about both. Next question. What's your most memorable moment as a ship captain, and why? And it can be, it can be anything. Rescuing someone from the sea or whatever. What sticks out?
Well, there are a lot of things, but this might be a nice one to tell. I was on the Princedom, and the Princedom was doing these longer cruises, and the guests on the Princedom have been everywhere. Okay, have been everywhere, done everything. Princeton, of course, now the Amera for Phoenix Rising in Germany. So if you cancel a port, they don't care because they've been there. They just sit there waiting to see where are you going next. And with this little ship, there was always a place I could go to. But one day we are sailing, and we had been blown out of a port somewhere in the Caribbean because of a hurricane coming or whatever. And we're happily sailing along, and I see a big blue whale, the biggest whale in the world. Yeah. And so that's something I see seldom. And I knew from those whales, they don't dive. They are just the biggest item in the world. They don't really are bothered about anything. So I came a bit closer at a respectful distance, but good enough to see them, to forever all our guests to see that whale in its full size. And then I asked the engine room, stop the engines and stop the air conditioning. So the whole ship went completely 100% silent. So people were there with the big whale, the blue whale that was happily there, floating along, spouting ever so often. And that was a very memorable experience because a cruise ship is never completely quiet because of the random background noise. But at that moment, the guests, I think for the first time in their lives, had a completely quiet ship. And I saw this most amazing mammal, the biggest one in the ocean. And that still stands out for me.
So it sounds fascinating and eerie at the same time. The total silence. Do you happen to have a picture?
No, because I was so busy with keeping an eye on the fact because we were dead in the water, we couldn't do anything anymore, that we had to make sure that nobody else came close by because there was no way I could move my ship aside or whatever. So people took pictures of the white whale, of the blue whale, but I've never got a chance to do it.
Okay. The oddball question. So I know that you have a large following. So let me say welcome to the many Captain Albert fans and family and friends who might be listening. We certainly hope you have liked what you have heard, and we'll come back to the Joy Cruising podcast to listen to some additional episodes, either past ones or in the future. So, Captain Albert, share one thing that my listeners and your fans and friends don't know about you.
Okay, put it this way. My life hasn't changed. I live in an apartment building, which is like a cruise ship on land with all these apartments. I run the building, I do the maintenance, and on Sunday I volunteer as bartender in the bar. So nothing has changed whatsoever.
All righty. Well, listen, Captain Albert, thank you for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. I am honored to have a cruise line captain on the show. All the best to you. Here's wishing you a blissful retirement. And as they say, I will see you on the ocean.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.